Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friday. Before we talk today about the topic I wanted to stream about, I wanted to take a moment to use my platform to just acknowledge what is going on in the United States and how it's completely unacceptable that folks don't feel safe and folks deal with various issues that me as a white person could probably never understand. So, what I can do though is I can express my disgust, I can express my opinion, and I can express that I'm an ally in Black Lives Matter. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the lives of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, who not only is today her birthday, but she also lived in the great state of Kentucky where I grew up, and Ahmaud Arbery. So I just wanted to just take a moment, recognize that, and challenge you if you're here today to think about how you can add to this movement and do the right thing. So just wanted to start off with that. And pivoting, if there is a pivot, which again, it's really hard to pivot in what's going on, but I know a lot of us are just dealing with trying to figure out what to do. So I just wanted to take a moment to at least acknowledge that. All right. So I think you're here because you are interested in this topic. This is a very hot button topic, and I hope to at least give you kind of an overview of various things that you need to consider. I'm completely honored and super excited that Mr. Don Clark from the UK is here, who is someone that I professionally admire and has a lot of wealth and experience as a person who hires instructional designers and also a pioneer in this profession. So I'm hoping he can also share his wisdom as we go on today. If this is your first crowdcast, again, welcome. My name is Kara North, and so glad that you all could join us today. Looks like we have a pretty decent turnout today. And if you have any questions going through, I am going to be monitoring the chat. But if I miss something, please call it out and say, hey, put it in all caps so I can see it. And you can also use the Ask a Question feature, which is right under the video for today. And another thing, too, is I am a resource aholic. If you know me and if you've seen on my other streams, I love kind of compiling together some resources. So if you look at the button right underneath my video, resources from this presentation, you can select that, and then that gives you kind of some of the goodies that I've curated today for you, in addition to this slide deck, which a lot of people always like the slide deck, so I got to give the people what they want. So with that, I just want to go over kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I want to kind of kick off with what is this instructional design formal education? I had the pleasure, if you want to put it that way, of researching this for one of my PhD candidacy questions. I just want to, again, just touch on it because I found it pretty interesting after I dove in a little bit about it. I want to talk about the different degrees. So what's a master's versus a PhD versus an EDD? I noticed there was, I believe Gabby, maybe in the chat, I believe it was Gabby, who has a certificate. And I'm not going to be talking specifically about certificates today because honestly, I don't know a lot about them, but that is something I'd love to have people on to maybe talk about. Another thing, questions that you should ask. So as you're considering if this is a good fit for you and the program is good for you, just a quick questions that you should go through. Lessons learned from my own experience. My warning to if you're brand new to instructional design, things you should be kind of leery of. Just some other resources, and again, your questions. Hey, Kristen, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. All right. And with that, I'm just going to put a disclaimer out here. Your experience may vary. So, as I'm talking very kind of broadly about this, just know that you may have a different experience than me, especially if you're outside of the United States. A lot of kind of what I'm talking about is United States specific. I did get a LinkedIn message from someone who was asking about Canada. And from a little bit of the research I've done, it seems like the education system, at least in higher ed, might be a little bit similar to Canada. So hopefully you can still have some takeaways from here. But if you are outside of United States, Canada, and you want to give kind of your insights to kind of higher education, please do that. I'm sure we can always learn from others in that regard. All right, so first question I'm going to tackle is you are probably wondering, hey, lady, what do you know about degrees in learning and development? So, just a little bit of background on me. I do have a master's in adult education, and I am finishing up. I am currently a PhD candidate in educational studies with the emphasis in learning technology. So, I just wanted to put that out there. Some people are like, why do you feel like you can talk about this? So, I do also want to highlight some really important people that supported me along my journey. So, obviously, the picture with the degree there, that was my master's, and that's my husband who has been my rock and support through all of this. The next picture is actually one of my best friends I made in my master's program, Anna Leach, and in the middle is my fantastic advisor, Dr. Quay Shea, who has been really instrumental in keeping me going. The bottom picture there are my two pals, the Taiwanese tigers, as I call them, Bobo and Sean, and they've been really supportive of me throughout my journey. And then above that, that's my girl, Jaren Korkmaz, Turkish tea, as I call her, who's also been a part of my program and a big rock and support pillar for me. And that's something I want to talk about a little bit later is, just kind of the selfishness of going through something like this. You have to cut time somewhere, and a lot of times that time cuts away from your family and other obligations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've balanced it and how I've had kind of a great support system along the way. Now, again, as I say, your mileage may vary, but I also want to put it out there that I actually kind of did this whole thing backwards. So I actually was an instructional designer before I got the degree. I ended up long story, working at Amazon as an instructional designer. And then I had the opportunity to move to Columbus, Ohio. And when I moved up here, I had kind of a couple different options I could have done for a job. But I was really interested in working at a university specifically because that was something they touted as you get free tuition. And so for me, it was kind of the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Like many of you, I fell into this. I didn't even know what instructional design was. And so the fact that I was able to work at a university and they gave me free tuition, it was a tremendous opportunity. So honestly, it was just shy of $85,000 of free tuition that I was given. And I got a master's, I say 1.75. So I'm not done with my PhD yet. I'm getting there, but got through candidacy and all my PhD coursework. So I just want to put that out there again because I think that I don't want to get it twisted. Because one thing that I want to talk about specifically is if you don't have that instructional design experience, it may be kind of a hindrance to you in your education. We'll talk a little bit about that. And again, want to hear your all's insights too as we're going through this. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about this instructional design stuff. Like, how did this happen anyway? What's kind of the history of instructional design? I'm not going to bore you too much on it, but based on some of the stuff that I found, really, especially in the United States, and again, Dawn, I know you're here, and other people that are outside the United States, I'd love to hear your perspectives as well, because again, we can all learn together. But as far as the United States goes, it really kind of got rooted in this audio-visual instruction. So specifically, like during World War II, the use of this was audiovisual was used to kind of deliver training, and it was referred to initially as this audiovisual instruction. But soon thereafter, like during the 70s, they started using terms like educational technology and instructional technology, and then it kind of took off from there, and these programs started to kind of pop up. Specifically about these various institutions. And then you got kind of this instructional systems design stuff going on. So, long story short, again, I want to be really brief on this, but I do think it's worth mentioning is there's a lot of influences that's kind of shaped what instructional design is. So you kind of have some of that audiovisual technology stuff. You have some influences of like educational psychology specifically. You may have some influences in, technology with the computer stuff. I mean, there's kind of all these like random influences that kind of touch the peripherals of instructional design, but I just wanted to say that because I think that also when you're researching programs and you're researching different degrees, you can look at 10 different schools, and 10 different schools will have 10 different names for their instructional design program. And I think a big reason for that is depending on their orientation of how they approach it, kind of the history of their program, etc. So we're going to dive into that, but I just wanted to again touch base on that real quick and just tell you a little bit about it. So great question, Andrea, in the chat. How do you get the experience without the degree and without prior experience? We'll talk about that. Hold on to that. Actually, if someone would be kind of to put that in the Q&A, I do talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, and I do want to touch it. But I do see your question, and we'll get to that. Another thing too, researching a lot of this stuff, I came across this gentleman named Spitzer, and he kind of had this Nostradamus-esque take on instructional design. I just wanted to share some of his bullet points that he wrote about in 1981. All right. So his first one is instructional design is ill-defined. Yeah, it still kind of is in a lot of places. Again, depending, if you look at the job descriptions, instructional design could mean that you are purely just a curriculum developer. Instructional design could mean you're an LMS administrator. Instructional design could mean you're an e-learning developer. Instructional design could mean that you're a trainer or a facilitator. There's just it's such a vast kind of term. And so I still feel like here today in 2020, that's still true. Another one that he said was about ADDIE, and that many of the instructional design programs and practitioners still mention it, but it's not a unifying philosophy. And this is still, again, true today. There's really kind of not really a big agreement on who kind of coined ADDIE, but the fact that people say that it's a model, I mean, that definitely gets a lot of people kind of hyped and hot, because saying it's a model might be a little bit of a stretch. Is it a good thing to kind of think about if you're starting out, to think about kind of a process? Yes. But my main criticism of ADDIE is that I feel like if you read about it, you expect in that first job that instructional design is this beautiful linear process. And if you've been part of my my other live streams about this, you know what I'm going to say here. But in practice, instructional design is pretty messy. You have a lot of different stakeholders. You have a lot of different variables at play. So the fact that they kind of make it this beautiful waterfall-esque method, I think, is really problemsome. And I think that that's something a lot of new instructional designers struggle with. And finally, this one might be the hottest of the takes that Spitzer said about educational programs are not designed to teach technology skills. And we're going to be talking about that here in a little bit. I do want to touch on what Don says here, because again, I really appreciate his thoughts. So let me scroll back up here. So he says that instructional design has never really been a college subject in the UK. They still don't have qualifications. They learn on the job is very common, and the degree courses is very much a UK thing. And UK still employ folk with maybe teaching or training experience and then train them up. Yeah, so I really appreciate that, and I have heard that from others, friends of mine that are in the UK. There's not really a formal instructional design program there. Yeah, Josh, I agree. So he says that everything he's seen is about ADDIE, about the military around World War II. That is true, but it's interesting if you search like who made it, you might get varying perspectives of that. But I do agree it's probably about that time period and kind of that era, and maybe it did actually come out of the military, but I don't know if they have like a sole kind of person that put their name on it. Kristen says, I only know one person in the US who got a degree in training as an undergrad. Everyone I know with a higher education degree in the space had prior tangible experience and then went into the degree to professionalize their work to try to get a better job in the field. Yeah, and that's another point I want to bring up. Even though I'm focusing on graduate degrees, there are very few undergraduate programs in this. I know my institution, Ohio State University, they do not have a corporate training. They did have a corporate training undergrad, I want to say, gosh, 2012, 2013, but the enrollment was so poor they ended up closing it out. But yet their master's and PhD programs continued to grow. So yeah, and it's so funny you mentioned that, Kristen. I don't know if you all know who Kara Spray is, but she's a friend of mine, and she's the only person I know who's a second generation instructional designer, because her mother is actually an instructional designer, and I think that's really neat. So to that point, yeah, I definitely think that is an issue. All right. Okay, so what do you do? So let's say you want to get a degree. Should you get a master's, a PhD, or an EDD? Or are you kind of scratching your head like, do I just need to say WTF? So I want to break it down again. United States perspective here. If you have others, please let me know. I'd love to hear them. So, typically, just breaking this down, master's degrees in instructional design, they're typically about 30 credit hours, meaning that's going to be about 10 courses ish. And depending on the program, you're going to have a couple of options as kind of that culminating experience. Some may have a comprehensive exam, some may have what's called a capstone, which is it that varies from institution to institution, or a project, meaning that they might have to have some kind of a deliverable of work. So again, depending on where you want to go, that might usually be what it is. As a again, just guidance, not a hard fast rule. The masters of science and masters of arts are usually more broad, but if you see a degree of like master of learning technology or masters of science and instructional technology. Sorry, I have to think about that one for a minute. Typically, those are considered more professional degrees, meaning that they should have been kind of more concentrated in instructional design. But again, that's definitely not a rule. Just again, baseline some of the stuff that I've researched, kind of a baseline there. Now, for an EDD, EDDs are typically about 85 plus credit hours. Now, depending on if your institution accepts if you have a master's, masters will usually shave about 30 hours off of that. If not, you do have to take the full 85 credit hours. And it's not uncommon. You can, at least in the United States, go from a bachelor's to an EDD or PhD. You don't necessarily have to get the master's. For me personally, I think masters are the easiest degrees to get. I mean, you just blink your eye and it's a year and you have a master's, I feel like. But that's just, again, my own personal opinion there. The big question that comes up a lot is like, kind of what's the difference between an EDD and PhD? And the big one is the EDD is very discipline specific. So the ED and the .D is for education. So you know it's going to be very kind of educational based. Whereas going over to the PhD, it's a more broad. It's a doctorate of philosophy. So there's going to be a lot of different varying factors that you may have in a PhD. Also, you have to go through candidacy in both, which I should have put that in both columns looking at it. But basically, candidacy is something you have to do after you finish your coursework to become what's called a candidate. And again, it's not the same at every school, it's a little bit different at each one, maybe, but the process is very kind of similar to the fact of you do your coursework and then you have to prove that you are able to do independent research for your dissertation. And so you go through a candidacy process. Now, I've heard from peers in other institutions, this is a very long interview process where they basically kind of ask you about your experience, where you want to go, what do you want to do. I've heard that done on the front end of the house. I've heard it done during candidacy. My own experience is basically I had to form a committee of 4 professors. I got to pick the professors, with the exception the chair was my advisor. I could petition to change that, but I didn't. I like my advisor. He's a good guy. But I picked professors that I wanted to be on my committee. And specifically, I kind of know what I knew what I wanted to do my dissertation about. And so the questions they asked me were basically kind of priming me up to do my dissertation research. So each person on my candidacy committee asked me a question that they thought would kind of help advance my thinking and kind of my foundation to get me to that dissertation research. So specifically, my dissertation topic is going to be about the participation in the Articulate e-learning heroes challenges. I'm very interested in motivation and informal learning. So that's kind of why I was interested in doing that topic. So some of the questions I got focused on, what does motivation mean? How do you define it? What's kind of a theoretical lens that you can use to situate motivation to explain kind of the phenomena that's happening. Another question I got talked about, because I'm doing a qualitative study, what is a case in a qualitative study? Again, I'm getting way in the weeds here, but you're getting the drift, I'm hoping. So it was very much individualized to me and what I wanted to do. I do also think you get that in the EDD. The main difference, I think, in the PhD and the EDD, their dissertation EDD is a lot of times more action based. So a lot of the EDDs that I have seen are very much rooted in kind of K through 12, or again, kind of that educational roots. Now, you can kind of do the fringes there on different ways of education you can think about as corporate education or what have you, but a lot of the ones that I've seen are kind of in that more kind of K through 12 space. And then the best part, if you want to think of it this way, is after you go through the multiple stages of suffering, um, which I'm currently between the two stages of suffering right now, you get your degrees and you put the letters after your name, and then people can call you doctor if you so desire, or you just put it on a credit card to feel fancy every once in a while. Probably what I'm going to do. Don't judge me. All right. Any questions about that? So again, just want to kind of give you a ballpark of explaining a little bit about them before we go into learning a little bit more. It looks like I do have a couple questions here. All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Some of these, I promise you all are setting me up beautifully. So thank you. All right. So going on here, I want to talk a little bit about questions that you should ask. If again, you know me personally, you know that I'm very analytical, especially when it comes to money. It took me a very long time to select purchasing a car. You can ask my husband; he was about ready to just pick one out for me. Like, he just didn't want to deal with it. But I think it's really important for you to do due diligence, not only with yourself, but with the program. So I want to talk about 10 questions I feel like you should ask of yourself and the program to kind of determine if it's a good fit for you. And this one should be your first one. What is my end goal? All right. So, what is your end goal? Why are you considering doing this? So, I love what Kristen said earlier about kind of getting that professional acclimation, kind of getting that, I don't know, for lack of a better word, kind of that you I don't really know how to say it. I'm kind of like at a loss for words, but basically getting that confirmation, if you will, that, hey, am I doing this right? Is this, am I on the right path? Do I have a good like foundational of theories and that kind of stuff? So that might be a good reason to pursue and get a master's or a PhD. For me, I was really kind of on the fence. So I love being an instructional designer. I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. I really can't. I truly love what I do. But I did have a period that I thought I would be a really good professor. And I wanted to help other people kind of fall in love with instructional design like I did. And I thought that that might be a good path for me. And so that for me was one of the factors that led me to getting a PhD. The other one was, again, at my institution, it did not cost me anything except my time to earn one. And I knew that was a tremendous gift a lot of people don't have. And so for me, I thought, shame on me if I don't take advantage of that. So I will also say money was definitely another contributing factor on why I decided to get that. Because again, it didn't cost me anything out of pocket, didn't have to get reimbursed or anything. So definitely thought that that was a good thing for me to do. And three, again, if you're in this profession or want to be in this profession, you have to be a learning freak. You got to love it. I mean, you got to keep your own learning going and growing. And a lot of us kind of think that, formal education might be a good way to do that. And again, there's other ways to do it too, which we'll talk about. But if that's kind of your purpose, then maybe that also might be another good thing for you. But here's going to be a point that I'm going to elaborate on a little bit more, but just to kind of tease it up. If you want to become a higher education ID, I do feel like you need a master's. I do. Now, if you want to be a corporate ID, you might not need a master's. I know a lot of brilliant corporate IDs that maybe have an associate's or a bachelor's and they're good. And I love what Don said in his post here about just the different skills. I mean, he looks for analytical skills, writing skills, those kinds of things. And you don't necessarily need a degree to demonstrate that. A lot of times you can demonstrate that in various other ways. So just think about maybe also where your end goal is as far as maybe where you want to be after the degree. So think about maybe a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 or 5 year plan, but then think about like what's your ultimate goal. So for me personally, I kept going with the PhD even when I decided there's no way I want to be a professor. I'll get into that here in a little bit. But after I figured out that wasn't my bliss and what I needed to do, what kind of kept me going with the PhD was I know that if I stay in a corporate setting, I do want to become a CLO. I'm very passionate about that. I've sought mentorship from a CLO, and that's kind of where I want to go if I stay in corporate. If not, I'd like to be my own consultant. But I do think having those letters after my name do also help with, again, coupling my experience to, again, give me kind of some of that legitimacy behind it. So that's just my own thoughts on that. All right. Next one, this is a huge one to ask if you are kind of shopping around and looking at a program. What is the curriculum? Now, for me, I am very much in the state of mind that if you can't find this in a Google search or find it on the website, that might be a potential red flag. I feel like you shouldn't have to chase an institution down to get a sheet and see kind of what the curriculum is. Now, a lot of times these are listed on the various websites of the institutions. You do have to dig around sometimes. Unfortunately, I don't think they do a lot of user experience testing on some of these websites, but you do kind of have to dig around. And what you're looking for is you want to see a couple of things here. One, you want to see what kind of courses am I going to be taking? Two, you want to see how am I going to be analyzed in it? So kind of what's that culminating project from earlier? So do you have to do a thesis? Do you need to do a capstone? What does that look like? And three, is that stuff that kind of gets you excited? I mean, is that stuff that you're just like, I think that's something that I want to do. So I just want to show you an example of maybe what one looks like here. I'm sorry if it's a little tiny there, but you do have access to the slides as well. But here's kind of what you're looking for here. So here on the left, you're seeing basically the different requirements. So they're listing out very specifically, okay, here's how that 30 credit hours breaks down. You have 21 hours of these core requirements, meaning these are classes that everyone has to take. You have a research course that everyone has to take. And then here are these electives. I get the autonomy to choose. So I got got like 5 to choose from. And then it looks like my culminating experience is all kinds of things. It looks like you can choose. So you have a capstone, practicum, action research, or a portfolio. So I think that's really important to look at because you really need to, again, this is your money, this is your time. You need to get the most value for it. And I really, really think it's important to do your research. Another thing too is I snipped this from the same website of this program, and I'm not saying where that's at. You may or may not know where this program came from, but basically they're explaining a little bit about what it is. So this one is a non-thesis. So non-thesis to me tells me that that's going to be a professional degree. And if you look over here, it's an MLT. So it's not going to be a Master of Art, Master of Science. It's going to be a Master of Learning Technology. So that's the key indicator to me. It tells me that's going to be a professional degree. They tell you a little bit about where people work at and explain a little bit about their program. So I definitely think that it is really important. I'm giggling because of what Dawn is saying, and I completely agree. So if they have anything on there about stating the objectives on the front of the course, learning styles, don't waste your money, and look for a strong module in cognitive science. And I'm going to get to that here in a moment, Dawn, about maybe some of my lessons learned with that. But yeah, I really appreciate that sentiment. That's funny. All right, this is a big one. Who teaches it? Okay. So for me, I had experience coming in as I shared with you all, and this was probably for me the biggest bubble that they bursted when I was in the program. My instructional design classes, I felt like I should have been able to test out of both of those, but I still had to take them. And the person teaching the class had never been an instructional designer. And it was evident by the way that they taught the class, and it was also evident by the way their course looked. That's also something else I'll get to here in a minute. So looking at that, knowing that, you need to take a look and research out these professors, they should be able to tell you on that page, specifically like who's the program chair, who are the faculty that are associated with the program, who teaches it, and do some research on them. See what their background is. Now, there's nothing wrong with if you want to be a researcher, if you want to go in to higher education, be a researcher, be a professor, then yeah, you want somebody with a strong research background, right? You want somebody with a lot of publications. But if you want something there about, you want to be a practitioner, you really need to do your homework. Now, a key indicator for me, if you're looking at that and you're like, I really, really want someone who has walked the walk and talked the talk, and somebody's actually been an instructional designer, some of the key phrases you might want to look for is you want to look for someone who's a clinical faculty. Clinical faculty means they have some kind of practitioner knowledge that they bring in. So if that's important to you, I highly recommend looking for clinical faculty. For me personally, I haven't totally shut the door on teaching. I know it's not what I want to do full time, but I would totally be up for being a clinical faculty member somewhere. I hope I have that opportunity one day, truly. I don't know if I'd give up my full time job for it, but I would like to do it on the side because I do really enjoy talking about instructional design and helping people. But definitely think you should do your homework on who teaches it, what's that composition of the various department. I just think it's really important, again, to do your due diligence on that. All right. This one right here is a big one. You have the right, I feel like, to ask what people do in that program. Seeing samples of students' work is really, really important. In the resources tab, I have a link to a video that Tommy Seelock did with Alex Salas on his Off the Cuff. And Tommy brings up a really good point about this, about, he was able to kind of get these resources of what students have done and really make a good determination of, just passing the sniff test if it looked good. I also shared that link to Tommy and Alex's conversation for another reason, and this might be one of my all-time favorite stories. But Tommy actually went to get a master's degree and was so disgusted and dissatisfied with what he got, he lobbied and was able to get a refund on his tuition. So he tells that story. So I definitely recommend hopping in and checking that out if that's something that you want to do and learn a little bit more. But definitely ask for examples of what students are doing, because again, that's going to help kind of tell the tale of different things too. Oh, hey, Matt Elwell, nice to see you. Glad you could join. All right, here's another one. Can I speak to an alumni of the program, or a current student for that matter? Now, in my program, I have kind of served as that student for people, and I was really kind of surprised I got picked for that, because I felt like, for me personally, because my program was very research based, I didn't feel like I was a typical student. I really always felt like I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, because I never was ashamed of my practitioner kind of shield, and I was never ashamed of letting them know that, like, maybe higher ed's not for me. I do want to be a practitioner. Oh, thanks, Kristen. Have a good one. But I think it's really important you talk to people that's went through it. And here's another one. If they can't give you somebody, I think that's a potential red flag too. If they're like, no, sorry, we don't want you to talk to this. I don't know how I feel about that. So another thing you could do is, if you are on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, you could search for somebody in the program. So I actually had somebody reach out to me. His name is Ankit, and I met him a couple years ago because he searched for my master's program on LinkedIn, found me, and sent me a message. Hey, I see that you graduated from the program. Can you talk to me about it? And then we're actually friends now, which is kind of funny. And he actually did end up doing the program. So definitely talk to somebody before you make the final call on this. And if possible, talk to multiple people. One person might not be enough to give you kind of a good information on that. All right, here's another big one. Ask them if their program has an advisory board. Now, what is an advisory board? Advisory board is essentially kind of a board of various community stakeholders and professionals that kind of give the programs information about what's going on in the field, what's going on in the job market, and how people can kind of, grow, and how they can help the curriculum become a little bit better. So I interviewed for my candidacy question, interviewed a chair of a program of a for a master's, actually, no, sorry, it was an EDD program. And they brought up that they had an advisory board, and I asked about the composition of it. And I was really impressed. So it was somebody who is extremely well known in the theory space in our profession, won't say names, and then local employers, and then also national employers in the ID space. So actual practitioners as well as managers. And so what they did was this program was able to actually kind of innovate, and they had an annual review, and they basically heard from the employers that they were wanting people to have more project management skills. They were really kind of not getting a lot of the project management skills out of the gate, out of the new graduates. And so that program was able to kind of do a flip and build out different curriculum about the project management, which I thought was really nice. So I would definitely ask this if they don't have an advisory board, or they kind of look at you like, a deer in headlights. To me, a couple indicators. One, they're probably very research based. And you're probably, if you want to be a practitioner, it might not be the best fit for you. And two, maybe they're not up for kind of keeping up with the times, which we'll also talk about here in a minute. All right. And again, another leadway into a great question. How often does the curriculum get updated? If you're getting stuff from, let's say, Donald Clark, what he said earlier about is mentioning learning styles, you know that that's probably not a good fit for you, and that should be a red flag. I actually, in my program, had a book that was assigned, and a chapter mentioned learning styles, and then the book was like from, I don't remember the time period, but I kind of got a kick out of that. I was like, yeah, that's not true. So you definitely want to look a little bit about how often the curriculum gets updated. Again, you have the right to ask these questions. If you take nothing else from this one, again, be inquisitive, ask these questions, because you want to make sure that this is the right fit for you. Another one, what are the typical assignments like? And this is me going to get on a little soapbox here. But if you are more in a research-based institution, your assignments, even in your instructional design class, might be a literature review, or it might be a research paper. It might not be a project brief. It might not be building anything. There are programs out there that you go through and you don't build anything. You don't manage a project. You don't have a case study, nothing. It's let's write, let's read, let's write, let's read, let's write. And then what happens is when you go to interview on a job, you might have the theory down, but then the practical experience, as someone alluded to in the chat, you don't have that. And it's really a disservice, because there's a lot of organizations that won't look at you unless you have some kind of a portfolio or have some kind of experience, right? So definitely ask this question. You probably want a nice mix. I definitely think that too much of one and too much of the other is probably not good. You don't want to have that extreme, but something in the middle, have a little bit of a mix of research with a mix of kind of project-based learning. That's the sweet spot. So if you can find something like that, that was probably going to be a good fit for you, again, if you want to be a practitioner. All right, another big one. What type of funding opportunities exist for this? Now, at least at my institution, the college that my program's a part of is very well funded, and every year they give out millions of dollars of scholarships. And according to people that I've talked to, they often don't have enough students applying for the scholarships that they have, meaning there's free money on the table for you to get the degree. So a couple of things I suggest, if you're at the opportunity to do so, if you could get a position at a university to work through your degrees, I highly, highly recommend that. One question I get a lot is, how on earth did you work full time and get your degrees? And the nice thing is, at least for the most part in higher education, they're very flexible about knowing that you are an employee and a student. I never had to really fight about, missing work to go to a class thing or work on a meeting or anything. They were always pretty flexible about it. And again, they're an education institution, so they want you to have those degrees as well, because that's kind of what they're selling, right? So be kind of hypocritical if they didn't. So I definitely want to bring that up. If you can, I recommend getting some kind of a job at the institution and then have them pay for it. Or if that's not a possibility for you, which I completely also understand, check into the funding opportunities. A lot of times they even have full assistant shifts if you do a little bit of part-time work for the college. So this could be, you could teach a little bit, you might be able to do some research on the side, but just know that this is very attainable for you, depending on where you want to go. But a lot of institutions do have funding now. I'm saying this obviously pre-COVID. I don't know what's going to happen kind of in the future, right? But historically, this has been the case. All right. This is another big one too. Where do the people go after they graduate? Are they getting jobs? Are they just chilling? Like what are they doing and where are they going? So if you're finding that people are working in the industry and sector that you want to work in, that's a good sign, because typically then that means that that employer recognized that that degree of that institution with that person's obviously skill set was good enough to get them hired. So definitely always ask that too. I think that's a really key question a lot of people don't ask. All right. So I talked a little bit about the questions, talked a little bit about the history. And so now what I want to do is I want to share just a couple lessons learned from my own experience. And again, with the caveat knowing that your experience may vary, may be different than mine, and that's completely fine. All right. So the first one is higher education as a whole, at least in the United States, I believe. And this is, again, I did an informal kind of peer review-ish, if you will, of my other friends, because I have friends at other institutions too. But it is very political, very political. And hands down, I can say that it is definitely the weirdest place that I've ever worked. And when I say that, I mean that there is just so many just power and politics. And again, I know that every place has power and politics. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, Kara, every place has power. Yes, they do. But the weird one in higher education is often just how do I put this? The authority of certain groups over other groups. That's, I guess, the nicest PC way I can put it. But it is really interesting, and I can't really explain it unless you've been part of it. But I was in a really awkward situation because not only was I a student, but I was also a staff member in the college where I was seeking my degree. So I would have kind of peerish conversations with faculty in my program, but then they would also treat me as a student, which was really weird. Again, I don't really know how else to explain it, but I just know that I felt really awkward a lot of the times and really struggled with that. I don't want to go too in depth about it, but just know that it's a political machine and it's weird. um, the next one, this one was a really tough lesson for me, but your advisor works for you. Okay. So if your advisor is not cutting the mustard, so to speak, and supporting you and guiding you, then you have every right to fire that advisor and move on. And I did this, and I had friends that were scared to death for me, and they said, "You're committing academic suicide by leaving your advisor." And I said, "Well, this isn't working for me, and I got to do something, because if I don't switch my advisor, I'm leaving the program." I'd made that decision up. And luckily, I was able to get a new advisor. My new advisor has been fantastic. I wish I would have switched earlier in my program, to be frank, but just know that your advisor works for you. And if you're not getting the support that you need, it's absolutely okay to switch them, because a lot of times your advisor may want you to be like them, meaning they may want kind of the same path for you or see you in a certain way. And that was kind of where I butted heads with my former advisor. I didn't want to be like that person. I had other goals and other aspirations. And again, that person didn't understand them, and that person didn't really value them. So I needed to make the decision to go somewhere else. And I'm glad that I did. So if you have an advisor that's not working for you when you go through this, please know that it's okay. And I found out after the fact it's very common for people to switch their advisor. So I felt less guilty, but I totally felt guilty at first about it. But again, they work for you. So please make the best decision for you on that regard. All right. That kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but if you have any of that experience coming in, you may have a breakdown seeing these courses. And what I mean by that is all the things not to do in best practice you may see in online courses. And specifically, I feel like maybe COVID era, um, I've seen a lot of what I'm calling panic gaji, just throwing anything up and calling it an online course. And that's not accurate and that's not the best practice. So just know if you have experience and you kind of have been around the block and can tell what good looks like, get ready because some of your standards might be busted. So that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. I'm a pretty vocal, outspoken person, but I had to bite my tongue a couple of times, just seeing some of the stuff that I saw. So just know again, if you have that experience, you may be kind of heartbroken in what you see. All right. And the other one, and this one is definitely, I think, been the absolute key to me sticking with it, is you absolutely have to have a support network. You have to. I am so grateful to my spouse. I'm so grateful to my family, and I'm so grateful to my friends. My friends have been so good to me and supporting me and really, lifting me up because it really is the hardest thing I've ever done to do this. And it is just because of the time and the tenacity. And that's another thing too. Again, I don't get it twisted. Getting a PhD doesn't make you smarter than anyone else. Okay. Getting a PhD to me is a pure testament to your tenacity, that you can stick with it, that you can follow through, that you can fight the good fight, so to speak. So I've kind of seen some people kind of toss it around like, oh, I'm smarter than, well, no, don't get it twisted. You're not smarter than anybody by necessarily doing these degrees. That means that you bettered yourself and whatever, but I hope nobody thinks that way here. But I have seen that attitude from people before, and I think it's really disappointing. All right. Here's another one too. And again, this was a lesson learned on me. Um, Focusing on experience over publication. So I took a big leap during my journey and really focused on networking and building my brand and putting myself out there and sharing thoughts and because I do think at the end of the day, networking really does open up a lot of doors for you. I was very fortunate. My new role that I have, I got on LinkedIn, so I, they liked me, and I got it through LinkedIn, and that helped. And I just think it's really important. So even though you may have publications or you may have kind of this pressure to publish, if you will, also focus on the experience and the people and networking because it is really important to do that. All right. And this one right here is very sad but true, but you may be kind of treated differently for having real world experience and also not wanting to be a researcher, depending on where you go. If it's more of a research based institution, I think this is definitely true. I feel like they often don't care if you become a practitioner. It's almost like, ew, they're going to work, like be an ID, like yuck. But for me, I think that yeah, and I think that's important. And a lot of times researchers talk about kind of bridging the gap between research and practice. Well, how on earth are you going to do that if you don't have any practitioner knowledge, right? So again, that one's definitely might be your mileage may vary, but that was something that I felt I dealt with. And definitely the coursework is easiest, especially if you do the PhD and EDD. You're like, huh, that's not that bad. Oftentimes, graduate degrees, in particular, graduate classes, are often graded pretty easily, just being transparent there. So, yeah, you're going to have to work and turn stuff in, but it is very much everybody kind of gets high marks. So, actually, I think that was my next one here. Yeah. Oh, no, actually, yeah, there we go. Everyone gets good grades. So, it may not have the rigor that you expected, at least in the coursework. But with that being said, everyone does also kind of have that imposter syndrome. And for me specifically, mine's definitely research and writing. And it still is today. Even though I passed candidacy, I don't know how I did it. And I still can't believe I did it, but I did it. So everybody is still kind of struggling kind of with the same things too. All right. And then finally, the last one, it can get really cutthroat. And I think that's true for a lot of graduate programs. There's a lot of kind of bickering and jealousy and animosity. But again, I roll with Shakespeare, to thy own self be true. So you know yourself, know your worth, know what you bring to the table, and just rise above it. Okay, so one thing I'd like to do is I want to give my blanket warning. I kind of got my pitchfork out earlier this week on LinkedIn about this, but just be careful. If you don't want to get a graduate degree, that's fine. There's a lot of great alternatives out there. I have some of them linked in the resources, and just please never give your hard-earned money to someone to mentor you. I tore into somebody earlier this week for putting out something that, oh, pay me to mentor you. No, like if I was still paying people who have helped me along my career, I would still be paying it off right now. There are so many people that were so kind to give their time to me, and I really appreciate it. So that's a big reason why I do these streams and these different programs, because I want to give back. I want to pay it forward. I want to help the next kind of generation coming up. So I really, really, really just want you to do your due diligence. If it doesn't seem right or smell right, it probably isn't right. And another one too, and I've seen this sadly too on LinkedIn. Do not fall for these schemes promising you a job if you take their program. Seen that a couple of times too. Oh, well, I promise you can get a job with this. Yeah, bull. Prove it. And a lot of times they don't prove it. And I did call someone out pretty vocally earlier this week, but I also called someone out more privately as well, who said that they had their own proprietary method of developing curriculum named after using their own last name, and they had the picture of what it looked like. And I asked, "Oh, is this the before?" And they said, "No, that's it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's not good." So just do your due diligence on that. If you have questions on is this good, is this not good, ask around. People are pretty open. You can ask various people like on LinkedIn or Twitter. They're going to give it to you straight, I hope. I don't think anybody will steer you wrong, but definitely get a couple extra opinions before you buy anything. I mean, I think that that's always a good rule of thumb anyway. Oh, hey, Esther, good to see you. All right. So other resources real quick, and then we'll hop into your questions. This one right here is kind of maddening because I had trouble getting it even with my university access to resources. But this book right here is published like once, I think every 2 or 3 years. But in this book, it has a list of like almost all of the graduate programs in instructional design in the United States, and it shares a little bit about GPAs and various things. So if you're interested in diving in deeper to the various programs, it's there. If you don't have access or don't want to do that, I have a nice link to a blog post that Connie Malmed did about various programs as well. So you can also take a look at that. All right. And with that, if you would like to connect with me, there are the ways to do so. I'm Kara North 11 on everything, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then my email gets you me. And then let's go ahead and drop this down. I'm going to get big. Woo. And then let's take your questions. All right. So, first question from Sarah. How do you get the experience without the degree, without prior experience? So, a couple of things I recommend right off the bat. One, there's a lot of volunteering opportunities for you. I can't stress to you like how important volunteering has been also for my career. So there you have a local probably ATD chapter or various professional societies. I got a lot of my volunteering experience from Toastmasters, believe it or not. And there's other opportunities out there like Leslie Price's Learn Appeal, where you can get experience as you're going. Another one that Tommy Seelock just started is Designers for Humanity. So it's a group of instructional designers who are trying to do something about the crisis going on in the United States right now for Black Lives Matter. So definitely there's opportunities out there, but you also have to be strategic. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew, and you also don't want to misrepresent where you currently are. So being transparent, saying, hey, I'm brand new to this. I've read a lot. I'm interested in honing my skills. Can I partner with somebody at your organization, or can somebody give me feedback? Asking those questions, I think, is really important too for picking those out. But definitely there are ways to do it with that. Don Clark, you're awesome. You're giving all the good stuff in there. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to answer this next one here. As someone with no ID work experience straight out of undergrad and no portfolio, I immediately applied for a master's program. As a beginner and Canadian, is this too hasty for me? I hope the master's would help. As internship, work experience, and network, would it be better to break into the field with a certification, work a bit, and apply for a master's program afterwards? All right. Here's kind of my take on it. And again, feel free to pop in to the chat because my take doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. But I, I I hate to say this. I think it depends on what you want to do. Now, I think that without any experience going in, doing a master's, I think you're going to be just fine. I do. But I think you're going to be it's going to be problematic when you get that master's and if you don't have kind of experience or anything to show for it afterwards besides just the piece of paper, then you might have be a little bit stuck in getting a job. What I do recommend is I would, again, just me, I would stay in that master's program, but then I would also on top of your master's commit to having kind of a learning session with yourself, and I would teach yourself at least one or two e-learning authoring tools just again to get the experience, get kind of that technical capacity because you're going to be hard pressed to find a degree program that teaches those technical tools to you. So that is definitely where a lot of people get kind of hung up on it. But again, depending on where you go, some instructional design places that employ people only have you doing the curriculum development, so you don't have to do the e-learning development. But more and more, a lot of these job postings are looking for these unicorns, if you will, people that can do the front end analysis and also build the learning experience. So that's, I guess, kind of would be my recommendation to you. But again, feel free, guys, pop in the chat and also help them out. Okay. Next question from Gabby. I'm hesitant to leave work to get a degree, so I'm leaning toward an online part-time program. I can continue working and take advantage of tuition assistance. What are your thoughts on the value of online degrees in today's job market? All right, great question, and this is one that I forgot to touch on. If anything, COVID has been the great equalizer of education. And when I say that, I mean it's not good enough for a program to say they're online anymore. Great, everyone is. Everyone has been. Great job. What's next? What else do you have? So I wouldn't necessarily think that an online degree program would be a hindrance to you in the future. Again, I would ask some of those questions I went over earlier. You know, what is the curriculum? What am I getting out of it? Where do students go? What do they do? Asking those questions, I think, will kind of help you make that decision. But I totally think, and this is me personally believe, I am a follower of Dave Ramsey. I do not believe in debt if you don't have to. I really hate that people have so much debt from student loans, which I think is a travesty all in itself. So if you do not have to pay for it or you do not have to take a loan, then I think that that is an opportunity for you to take advantage of it. So if your work is going to do a reimbursement or tuition assistance or whatever it's called, I would definitely take advantage of that working part-time or full-time, whatever it is that you have to do to get that tuition assistance, I would definitely do it because I don't think that, again, my opinion, I do not think seeking a formal degree in instructional design is worth going into debt for. There, I said it. I didn't think I was going to say it, but I said it. All right. Next question. Does academia have the skills to teach contemporary theory or practice, or does it fossilize old theory and practice in a fast-moving field? Oh, Don. I think you know the answer to that. At least my experiences has been the latter. Now, with that being said, a program that I have seen a lot of people talk about that's been great, and a couple of friends of mine that graduated from that is the Boise State program. And the reason that I've heard them talk about it is because they are actually producing stuff. They do have a portfolio piece. They talk a lot about design thinking. They talk a lot about various things. And I've seen a lot of the work of some of the people that came out of that program. I've been very impressed with it. It passed the eye test, if you will. So again, definitely do your due diligence on that. But I love that question. All right, next question. So, aside from degrees and certifications, what are some other credible learning resources? For example, LinkedIn certification being ID, would it be helpful in a foundation and have value to employers? All right, great question. Again, I'm just going to give you my personal opinion on that. for me, if you're going to do something that's professional development, I think you need to have some sort of a feedback on it. I don't think just consuming something is necessarily a good professional development. Getting a certificate of attendance is not good professional development. That's my beef, I think, with LinkedIn Learning as a whole. I think a lot of the stuff is very good for an awareness, but as far as getting kind of those deeper skills, getting the application, getting feedback on stuff, you don't get that in LinkedIn Learning. So that's kind of a knock on it from me, because I think that's how we grow and learn, is through feedback. That's something that's really critical. And again, a lot of the stuff that these programs teach, you can find online, but what you're not getting is what the feedback. And if the feedback is coming from people that maybe don't have the same goals, aspirations, or background that you want to have, then that might be a problem. If you're getting feedback from somebody that's never been an instructional designer about your stuff, it might be a little bit harder to do stuff. So I just want to put that out there. But again, that's kind of my opinion on it. I do think that it's good to show, LinkedIn Learning is good to show that maybe you care about your own professional development. I think that's also very, very important. But I would just be leery of saying, "Oh, look, I got this cool badge from LinkedIn Learning. Now I know everything about ID." Not to say you do that, but I know there are people out there that collect things like that and want to put that on. So all right. A couple other things. So, what new skills are needed given that LXPs and AI are now in the field? I love your questions, Don. It's so great. We're having to retrain IDs, more tech knowledge, dialogue with chatbots, learning analytics, nudge learning, etc. Okay. Great question here. I don't think this gets enough love. I was really pleasantly surprised to see the ATD capability model. If you're not familiar with that, the Association for Talent Development is a professional development organization that's worldwide for learning development professionals, does mention some of that stuff on there. Now, I know for myself, Don, the stuff that I have learned, some of it's actually came from you in your blog post. Some of it's came from other people out there. So I definitely think that what you said about the tech knowledge, especially data, I mean, data is so important and doesn't get enough love in very many programs. I think that that is something that unfortunately doesn't get hit on a lot in these formal degree programs, and it might be something that the person's going to have to drive their own development on. But as far as I know, the